Randy, you guys have been getting a lot of that irrigation and a lot of that water over the past month and a half or so. What has that done for cotton?
Well, the water has been a real blessing. We had a significant amount of rainfall, of course, in the month of May, but it really started back in April. And I think if we look at the data for the mesoneted altus from April, May, and June total, I believe we're sitting at about 20 inches or so. Of course, growers in other areas, maybe certainly around Tipton and further east that we go, and also further west over toward Hollis, there's been substantially more rainfall during those months in those areas. So it's been a real blessing, and finally delivered what I would call, I guess, a knockout punch to the drought. We're always looking over our shoulder for the next one, but certainly with Lake Lugert full and the Tom Steed basically the municipal water supply reservoir full, we can certainly take a deep breath and thank the Lord for the rainfall that we've got in the last 90 days. The good news is that we finally dried out around May 26th or 27th, somewhere in there, really began planting fast and furiously, if we want to say that. And really, I think at the end of the day, certainly within 2 to 2.5 weeks, we had this 2015 cotton crop pretty much in the ground. A lot of times when we have a mid-May planting, we typically have some cooler conditions.
Right.
We may have some weather events that come through that kind of, as we say, rag up the cotton. And all that environmental damage, it basically causes these internodes to not be quite as long. This is a vigorously growing plant. It actually looks like it came from a greenhouse.
Right. Because
of the protection. And so a lot of times, like I was saying, we have environmental damage that occurs, and it kind of sets the plants back. So from planting through about first pinheads, or I should say pinhead square stage, when we can first go up in here and find a pinhead square, it's normally about 35 days. Mm-hmm. Now, under really good growing conditions like this plant's been through, it could be significantly fewer. And as we move on into if we want to look for our first bloom, mm-hmm. The old rule of thumb is about 60 to 65 days, and that would be with an early to May to mid-May type planting date. So with the June planting date, and with this cotton really growing vigorously, we may actually hit first bloom in 50 to 55 days.
So Randy, what has insect pressure been like with the cotton so far?
Well, actually, Dave, the typical early season insect pest that we have in cotton is the thrips.
Right.
And it's actually more or less been out of sync with cotton, mm-hmm. because the wheat dried down. And of course, normally we would see cotton emerging around the middle of May, toward the end of May, and a lot of the thrips would be relocating their homes from wheat fields over to the cotton fields. And in actuality, we just haven't seen hardly any thrips pressure at all this year.
Right.
We have another insect that's very predominant in Oklahoma cotton, and that's the cotton flea hopper. And it actually will ramp up its numbers on alternate hosts in the ditch, in ditches, and maybe even in some rough areas where there's lots of vegetation growing. And then those flea hoppers will move in right about squaring time. Mm-hmm. And they will actually feed on the small primordial blooms that we call squares, or actually primordial flowers that we call squares, and cause a lot of yield loss. And so in 2015, the last thing we want to do is to suffer any kind of a yield loss from those early season insects, such as thrips or maybe even flea hoppers a little bit later. We really don't need the maturity of this crop set back at all, and so we need to be retaining sticking fruit, as we call it, from the get-go once we get there, and we'll probably be there in another 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks probably. We'll be seeing some blooms.
You sound a lot more optimistic than last time we were here, because we were out by the research station over by Altus, mm-hmm. and we were shredding cotton plants. What's it like for you, a cotton guy? What's it mean to you?
It's just a tremendous, it's like a tremendous burden's been lifted off our shoulders in this part of the universe. I mean, we've really struggled all in this region. It's not just right around Altus here, but certainly we've had a maximized share of grief because we've had no irrigation water with which to make a crop. And so unfortunately we've had to call the insurance adjuster out too many times in the last 4 years. But we really feel like we've got some potential this year. We have a full soil profile under the cotton crop in just about all the counties. Well, I wouldn't know of a single county that shouldn't have the full soil profile of moisture. That's a real plus. As you were aware, we got another rain, which the reason why we're in this field is because it's a nice sandy field, and at Altus we picked up another rain last night, so we couldn't get out to the field there. So that's a real plus. And we have the irrigation water. I'm sure that as we look along the North Fork with the amount of water that it carried on into the main Prairie Dog Town Fork of the Red River, as we look at that, we see how much water came down. I'm sure we got a lot of recharge in this Tillman Terrace aquifer. We got a lot of recharge out in the Blaine Gypsum aquifer, which was really getting pretty testy. And then of course along the Otter Creek alluvium, it actually flooded pretty significantly below Tom Steed Reservoir back in May, and so I'm sure that we got a lot of recharge out of that. So the good news is, in cotton growing country, we're in pretty good shape. We're just a little bit late. We're hoping that we can make up for it with some vigorously growing crops.
Well, thank you much, Randy. Randy Boman, cotton specialist here at Oklahoma State University.